5 million disinfectant wipes, all made in Canada. Over the past few months, our government has helped companies retool their manufacturing facilities and massively scale up production to meet the demands of this crisis. I want to thank every entrepreneur and every worker who stepped up to contribute to this fight. As we start to reopen and some people head back to work, the need for personal protective equipment and other essential supplies like hand sanitizer and disinfectant will continue to grow. We're making sure we're ready for that. On Saturday, a ship carrying 160,000 liters of hand sanitizer arrived in Vancouver, and we're expecting 7 more ships with hand sanitizer in the coming days. We also have almost 1 million face shields and more than 7 million pairs of gloves on their way to the provinces and territories. And to connect businesses looking for PPE with suppliers, today we're launching a PPE Supply Hub website. We also created new, innovative procurement streams to allow more businesses to develop solutions and products Canadians need because of this pandemic. We've always known that Canada is home to some of the best innovators in the world, and it's been great to see so many of them use their talent and know-how to help our communities during this crisis. In April, we put out a call asking for creative, made-in-Canada prototypes that will help current and future outbreaks of COVID-19 and similar public health emergencies. And in just 2 weeks, we received over 550 proposals. We will soon be selecting some prototypes for testing, and innovators will be able to work with the government to scale up production.
After spending several months at home, life is slowly starting to return to normal. Of course, we have to remain very vigilant and continue to follow public health care advice. But some businesses can start to reopen, and that is good news. Neighborhood businesses, small businesses are playing an essential role in our communities, and we have missed them during confinement. And now it's time to encourage them as much as possible, while being careful and wearing a mask if need be. The recovery presents a number of challenges for business owners. After closing their doors for a number of months, many are having trouble starting up their activities again and rehiring their employees because they have liquidity problems.
Get ready to reopen. More employers are using the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to rehire their employees. Just take Track and Trail in Edmonton. Track and Trail was well established in the community, selling outdoor clothing, equipment, and footwear for 36 years. When the pandemic hit, they had to close down their stores. After a number of challenging months, they're now ready to welcome customers again. And as part of getting their shops back up and running, they used the wage subsidy to help rehire their employees. Shops, local entrepreneurs, and business owners are the backbone of our economy. They make our towns and cities better places to call home. And collectively, they are the largest employer in the country. As we start to reopen, some businesses will need support to get back on their feet, and our government will be there to help with programs like the Emergency Wage Subsidy. I also want to remind people that we launched a hotline service to help entrepreneurs and small business owners, including not-for-profit organizations and charities, navigate these uncertain times. People with pressing financial needs can now call 1-866-989-1080 to speak with an accountant or a business advisor.
I want to close this morning by reminding all business people that we now have a hotline to help them come through this uncertain time. Businesses and entrepreneurs, including non-profits, will now be able to call 1-866-989-1080 to receive assistance from an accountant or a financial advisor.
During this pandemic, our government has been there for Canadians every step of the way, and we will continue to propose measures to support them. On Saturday, we shared draft legislation with the opposition parties, which included additional proposals to help people. This legislation will aim to provide direct support to people with disabilities, support more workers through the wage subsidy, and ensure that Canadians who aren't able to meet certain judicial timelines, such as bankruptcy, aren't unfairly punished. We will also strive to make CERB payments more flexible, while making sure that those who knowingly and wrongfully claim the CERB face consequences. Discussions are ongoing, but I fully expect us to be able to work well with the opposition to deliver this important support to Canadians.
The coming weeks will be busy as we start to see activities resume. But as always, you can count on our government to support you. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va commencer la période de questions par le téléphone aujourd'hui. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. For questions, star 1. Pour les questions, étoile 1. Première question, Michel Lamarche, TVA. À vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like you to comment on this NDP proposal to extend the CERB by 4 months. Is that a possibility, or should we assume that will stop for the people who've been receiving it in the last few weeks? I think it is important to understand that at every step of the way, we are looking at what the proper measures are to help people and what exactly we need to do to restart our economy. The CERB was introduced to help people who no longer had any income, who had lost their jobs because of COVID-19, and it has helped more than 8 million Canadians. Of course, in an economy that's functioning on all cylinders in the next few months, we won't need the CERB. But that transition period, and now we're starting to restart businesses and certain sectors of the economy. There are still some 3 million people out there who don't have a job and who would like one. So we know that we'll have to look at how we can end the CERB and transfer people to the wage subsidy, and how we can introduce the right measures to restart the economy. And those are the discussions that are underway right now between us in government, but also with other parties. Now, as you say, this is an issue we have to follow closely, and we're open to all kinds of suggestions. Follow-up?
As you know, Michelle, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit was brought in to help those millions of Canadians who lost their jobs because of the pandemic and needed support to be able to pay their rent, to pay for their groceries, to support their families. And we did that. Obviously, as the economy starts to reopen, there will be more and more people going back to work. More and more companies will choose to take the wage subsidy, and therefore people will be leaving the CERB to get onto that, because people can start working and be connected to a job even while they get income support. But obviously, with around 3 million people unemployed and looking for work, it is going to be a while before we get enough jobs to consider that things are back to normal. So we're looking very carefully at how we will move forward with the package of measures that we've put forward in a way that makes sense to both encourage people to get back to work, encourage companies to get going again, while at the same time supporting and protecting those people who cannot work because of the pandemic. So we're going to continue our discussions both internally and with other parties to get this right for Canadians.
En suivi, Michel?
A follow-up, Michel?
Oui, est-ce qu'il faut comprendre de
Yes,
ce que vous
should
dites
we
qu'il y aura
understand
des
from this that there will be changes made to the CERB, particularly initiatives to help people return to work in the coming months? And I'd like you to comment on fraudsters. Why did you change your idea about that? Well, first of all, yes, there will be changes made to all of our programs as the pandemic evolves and the situation in Canada goes back to normal. So we will certainly be adjusting our programs to meet the needs of communities and Canadians and families right across the country. So we will continue to do that, as we've been doing right from the outset, to change things as we go along. But with respect to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, we decided right at the beginning to send the money out to as many people as possible. If we had made things too complicated in terms of applying for the benefit, and if we had ensured there were a lot of checks before people could get it, we could never have got those checks out within a few weeks to millions of Canadians who desperately needed that money. But we also knew that would mean that after the fact we would have to introduce measures to correct any mistakes and act on fraud, which unfortunately occurs in many different circumstances. So obviously, if there are people who made a mistake, who applied for the CERB and the wage subsidy, they will have to pay back one of the two. But they will not be punished if they made a mistake where there was so much uncertainty at the time. At the same time, we need to have concrete measures in place to address the small minority of criminals who took advantage of this pandemic and a period of extreme difficulty in our society to collect this benefit unfairly. And we have to have measures in place to do that about deliberate fraud.
The Canada Emergency Response Benefit was put in place in a way that we knew would maximize the speed with which it would reach the millions of Canadians that needed it. That's why we didn't put a tremendous amount of complicated checks and background checks and verifications up front, because we needed to flow that money quickly to the millions of Canadians who had no more paychecks and didn't know how they were going to pay for their groceries or their rent. And that's what we did. But we always knew from the beginning that there would be mistakes, and indeed that there would be a small number of fraudsters who would try to take advantage of it. Now, there may be a number of people who mistakenly took both the CERB and the wage subsidy because they weren't sure what they were going to do and they were really worried and they just took everything. Those people will simply have to pay back the one that they shouldn't have been taken, and we're not looking at punishing people who made honest mistakes. Obviously, this is a time for us to pull together as a country. But unfortunately, in every situation, there are a few criminals who will deliberately try to take advantage of a moment of solidarity, a moment where we're in crisis and we're trying to help each other out by deliberately frauding the system. And as I said, defrauding the system. As I said from the very beginning, we will make sure that we are punishing people who try to take advantage of this situation. And we've put measures in place that will allow us to go after the deliberate fraudsters who are trying to game the system for criminal benefits.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Ryan Tumulty, National Post. Line open.
Yeah, good morning, sir. I'm wondering, several of the opposition parties have said that as part of their support, they want to see a fiscal update from the government. You didn't have a budget this year for obvious reasons, but I'm wondering why we're not going to see a fiscal update, or if we're going to see a fiscal update before the end of Parliament sitting.
We've continued, Ryan, to demonstrate openness and transparency on all the measures we've put forward. We've answered questions on all of them, both from the opposition, from press conferences like these. And we've announced all the measures we're putting forward, and there has been a tremendous amount of transparency. The challenge with fiscal updates is a core part of that is predicting what things are going to look like for the rest of the year and for the coming years. And obviously in this situation, any predictions we make will be wildly unreliable, even from one week to the next. We're grappling to understand what exactly the Canadian economy is doing in this unprecedented situation. We will, however, continue to look at ways of being open and transparent with Canadians about the measures we've put forward, about our expectations for the coming weeks. And that kind of transparency is just what Canadians expect, and we'll be working with Canadians on that. Okay.
I think people know that we have been transparent since the very beginning of this crisis with all the measures we introduced for Canadians. We are regularly taking media questions, questions from the opposition, and sharing our investments with the Finance Committee so that people can see exactly how we're taking action in this pandemic. The challenge with economic updates is that an integral part of those updates is a prediction of what's going to be happening between now and the rest of the year. And of course, we're in a situation which is totally uncertain, where we ourselves have trouble understanding what's going to happen in a month or two, let alone in 2 or 3 years. So we will continue to seek some way of being transparent with Canadians, but people must not expect we'll have an absolutely clear idea of what's going to happen on January 1st, 2021. It's still extremely uncertain, and our priority remains to be here now to support people as they need that help.
Yeah, sir, I'm wondering, though, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has been able to make projections. You've been able to cost all of your programs to date. I know what you're saying about the unpredictability of the Canadian economy, but next week you're going to ask Parliament to approve $87 billion in new spending. Wouldn't it be beneficial to have a best guess of where that's going to put the country's debt and deficit?
We have been, obviously, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer and at Finance Committee, we've been tallying up the costs and the expenses and the investments that we've been making to support Canadians through this. But establishing or laying out the state of our economy when our economy is, for the large part, frozen or in a coma. Like right now, most or so many businesses and economic activity is simply suspended. It's not gone. It's not never coming back. It's not quietly going along slowly. It's just in suspension. And to know what's going to happen when it restarts is extremely uncertain. So we will continue to be open and transparent about all sorts of things in terms of what we're doing and how much we're spending and what our path looks like, what our expectations for that spending in the coming weeks looks like. But a fiscal update that talks about, what our projected revenues or expenditures could be 6 months from now or a year from now would be incredibly unreliable because we just don't know what the impact of this pandemic is on the sum total of the Canadian economy because we are suspended right now. La réalité, c'est que de créer des prévisions sur ce que notre économie pourrait avoir l'air
of what our economy could look like once it starts up again. Well, the fact is we don't know because our businesses, our entrepreneurs and organizations across the country are really at a standstill right now. Will they reopen at half capacity, 3/4 capacity, or fully? Will they simply disappear? So the fact is there will be many different situations that we see in the coming months as this pandemic progresses, if there's a second wave, and there will also be international impacts. So we will continue to be completely open and transparent about the expenditures we're making and what we expect to do in the coming months. But laying out the state of our economy now and what the state of our economy will be in a year or 3 years would be basing ourselves on estimates and random choices.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau.
Au projet de loi,
Coming back to the bill that will be introduced tomorrow, some opposition politicians have been saying that you would be penalizing even further rationalized and Indigenous communities. What do you answer that? How do you answer that criticism? Well, I understand that concern, but I can tell you that is absolutely not the intent of this bill. With this bill, first of all, what we want to do is help Canadians living with disabilities. We want to give them money. We want to ensure that more businesses can qualify for the wage subsidy. We want to ensure that we are helping more people through this legislation. But the fact is that we're also looking at new measures to deal with fraudsters who deliberately decided to take advantage of the system at a time when everyone is in a crisis and a little bit vulnerable. So we do not want to, and it is not our intention, to penalize people who make mistakes. But we must have a system that is rigorous and can deal with criminals. But I'm looking forward to working with the other parties to address their concerns and perhaps make changes to this bill in order to improve the way it helps Canadians and protects the integrity of our system. Follow up? Yes. With respect to the CERB, Mr. Trudeau, I may be mistaken, but it seems to me in recent weeks you were signaling that it would be ending soon. Today, you say that you're open to an extension or some adjustments to the program. What has changed since you first introduced it? Well, from the very beginning, we knew that the CERB would be there to help people who are not working, not at the job, and as the economy started up again and people could go back to work, we would need it less and less. But with the kind of job losses we've been seeing, 3 million Canadians out there are seeking a job and can't find one. So we know that we will need it for some time yet. The wage subsidy will not be there to help every single person who lost a job. So we are currently looking at how we can make that transition to an economy starting to reopen with businesses claiming the wage subsidy instead. But there are many people who still can't work because of COVID-19 and need direct support.
Opérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
Merci. Thank you. Prochaine question, Lina Dib, La Presse canadienne. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning,
Excusez-moi,
Mr. Trudeau.
surprise. Je pensais que les Français avaient fini.
I was surprised. I thought it was over.
Je voudrais revenir sur,
I'd like to come back
de la PCU et
to the CERB and the bill you'll be tabling Wednesday. As I understand it, when you say that you want to address the small minority of criminals who are abusing, I presume you're saying they're not the type of people Mr. Singh has referred to, that has to be rigorous. In a pandemic like that, we want to be there for our neighbors. People are helping each other, and they would not like to see people who deliberately decide to exploit and defraud the system, where initially we decided to get that money out the door and do the checks afterwards. We wanted the system to be fair, of course, and in that context we have to look at all situations and look at these things case by case, but we have to have a rigorous system to ensure that we are helping the right people. Follow up? Yes, I understand. And with respect to the transition from the CERB to the wage subsidy, I know you said that you wanted people to use the wage subsidy more, but thus far that hasn't really worked very well. Do you have a plan in place, or what exactly will you do to encourage people to move to the wage subsidy? I just want to correct you, Lena. Right from the outset, we knew that people needed the CERB. They had lost their jobs. The economy was at a standstill for 2 months, and people no longer had an attachment to their job. There were thousands of people out there who were not receiving a paycheck anymore, and we needed to ensure that those people could stay home and they wouldn't be trying to look for income one way or another in the midst of confinement. So the CERB was there for when the economy was completely shut down, and we wanted the economy to be shut down in order to protect people's health. But at the same time, now as the economy starts up again, and as people return to work, by remaining vigilant and being careful, of course, there will be a lot of people who will be going off the CERB to benefit from the wage subsidy instead, or simply go back to their job. So, as the situation evolves, there will be fewer and fewer people who will need the CERB, and therefore we will be making changes to the system. But the system is operating step by step in the right way.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, BNN Bloomberg is reporting this morning that finance officials are preparing to deliver a fiscal update sometime this summer. Your government didn't deliver a federal budget this spring, and Canadians don't really have a clear picture of where the government finances are. Will you commit to delivering either a budget or a fiscal update before Labor Day?
We have been open and transparent every step of the way about our investments, about the measures we're taking to support Canadians. We've been presenting regularly at Finance Committee all of our expenditures. We've been debating measures in the House. We've been taking questions from media, from opposition parties every step of the way, because transparency during a time of crisis is extremely important. And we will continue to look for ways to share with Canadians what we're doing, how we're helping them, and what kind of fiscal frame we find ourselves in. The challenge with any fiscal update is, as the economy starts up again, it's very difficult to know what that will look like. We can certainly have a range of projections that will vary widely depending on how many businesses reopen and to what percentage. Are restaurants going to be half full? Are they going to rehire? Are they going to shut down and go bankrupt? Are people going to start going out again and shopping? Are they going to hunker down for the summer in their cabins or at home and not go out? I mean, there are so many things that we simply don't know, that making projections about what our economy could look like 6 months from now or a year from now would be an exercise in invention and imagination. Obviously, we need to continue to be transparent and concrete about everything we're doing, and forecast what kind of expenditures we're going to have in the coming weeks and months. But a proper fiscal update is something that includes usually projections on 3 to 5 years in the future that we simply don't know about.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer has produced a deficit projection of $260 billion. I don't think he would consider that invention or imagination. But regardless of what that figure is exactly, future governments are going to have to carry that debt. The servicing costs on that are going to be very high.
Sorry?
The servicing costs on the debt that you're going to have to carry, that you're adding to now, right?
Interest rates are at historic lows, Glenn.
Okay, but it's still a lot of money.
No.
It's still a lot of money.
No.
And you don't know where. Okay, but how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for those costs in future years? Are you going to increase taxes, or are you going to cut programs?
Okay. Right now, we're in an absolutely unprecedented situation where our economy had to completely shut down. And the government chose to and needed to be there for people while they lost their paychecks, while they could not be comfortable in how they were going to be able to support their families, pay their rent, pay for their groceries. We put forward measures to support Canadians right across the country so that we could stay healthy and so that we could have an economy to come back to as soon as the opportunity arose. We have been absolutely transparent every step of the way about these investments we're making for Canadians, about how we are supporting millions of Canadians, millions of people, thousands upon thousands of small businesses across this country get through this unprecedented time. Canada went into this crisis with a far better fiscal position than just about any other G7 country. And we are coming through it extremely well as well. The investments we're making that will allow Canada to bounce back strongly from this are the kinds of things that we needed to do during this pandemic. And as we move forward, because of historically low interest rates, the debt servicing costs will be low. But we will need to look very carefully at how we remain fiscally responsible as we move forward. But the best thing to focus on is ensuring that Canadians can come back from this strongly, that they can get back to work, that they can reopen their stores and their businesses, that they have confidence once again in our economy and our future. And those are the things that we needed to do in the short term in order for us to have a long term for our Canadian economy. Okay.
We were facing an unprecedented crisis where thousands of Canadians were in a situation where they no longer had any income, they no longer had a paycheck to buy groceries or pay their rent or care for their family. We had a duty as a government, and we made the choice of helping them. Because in order to get through this crisis, this health crisis, so that we could eventually bounce back very strongly when the crisis was over, we needed to make immediate investments to help Canadians. And the best way of having a healthy economy in the coming years was to ensure that people could get through the crisis, they could hang on, and that's exactly what this government decided to do. With historically low interest rates now, the fact that the government decided to help Canadians as we did, well, that was the best way of minimizing the consequences and the costs of these measures for years and decades to come. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. At the end of the 16-week period for the CERB, a lot of people will fall into a vacuum. They won't have access to the wage subsidy, they won't know what to do, and they won't have a job. What can you say to those people who are feeling tremendous uncertainty now? They don't know what the transition will be. Perhaps you could explain to them what measures you are considering now. Would it be a more targeted and flexible CERB? Would it be the return to an employment insurance program? Could you give us some indications, please? From the very beginning, we have said as a government that we would be there for people, that we would be there to support them. We created the CERB to help thousands of Canadians who had lost their jobs. And even if the economy is starting to reopen now, we are fully aware of the fact that not all jobs will be coming back right now. People will continue to need help, and we will be making announcements in the coming days that will explain exactly how we're going to help them. But I can reassure people right away that as a government, we will continue to be there to help you, to support you in the midst of this crisis. Now, on the question of fraud, will there be additional staff brought in to do those checks? And who will do them? Because if you're announcing penalties such as this, I mean, that may be a bit of a smokescreen if there's no one there to, actually apply them. Well, from the very beginning, we introduced new staffing and brought in new staff in order to be able to get that money out the door and apply the CERB the way it was supposed to be applied. We have been working with an extraordinary public service that has done an outstanding job right across the country in delivering these programs to ensure that the integrity of the program would be maintained and that there would be consequences for anyone trying to deliberately defraud the system.
Good morning. You as a government, you talk about being transparent, you talk about using evidence to guide your policy decisions. What evidence do you now have, what analysis have you done to look at why people are not transferring from the CERB to the wage subsidy and how to go forward as the economy reopens?
I think the important thing to understand was the emergency response benefit was there to support people during the time, and is there to support people during this time of crisis when they lost their jobs because of COVID-19. They cannot work because of this pandemic. through no fault of their own. And the government needs to be there to support them so they can continue to support their families, continue to pay rent and buy groceries. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit was created for the time when we were telling everyone, stay home, don't go to work, shut down your businesses, keep your neighbors safe. It was there to replace revenue at a time where massive parts of the economy were completely shut down. And it serves and served its purpose extremely well and will continue to be necessary until we move forward enough to get most people back to work. As people start getting back to work, as people start thinking about that link between employer and employee in businesses, small and large, right across the country, more and more businesses will start taking on that wage subsidy as a way of preparing and reopening. This is a natural progression of things from that moment of we need people to stay home and not collect paychecks to now we want you thinking about your job and reconnecting as different parts of the country are reopening in a progressive way, in a gradual way. So the transfer from most people on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit towards more and more people on the wage subsidy as the economy picks up again is exactly what we foresee and exactly how the system should work.
Prime Minister Janet Silver, Global News. In mid-May, when we first heard reports that there was some fraud with CERB, you discounted the abuse, saying that it was probably just a few people among millions of Canadians who are applying for this benefit. But now you're bringing in legislation that will fine or imprison people for fraudulent claims. I'm just wondering what specifically changed in the last 3 weeks to change your thinking to push for this?
The thinking hasn't changed at all. We always knew that the choice we had to make with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit was minimizing the amount of paperwork and verification up front so that it could flow rapidly to the millions of people who needed it. But we knew at the same time that there would be mistakes made, good faith, honest mistakes that we would need to clean up afterwards and make sure that people paid back if they got both the wage subsidy and the response benefit, for example. And there's no harm, no foul on that if it's an honest mistake. But unfortunately, we also knew that, as with any system, there would be a very small minority, as I pointed out, of people who deliberately try to take advantage of the system. And we need to make sure that we have the tools to be able to assure the integrity of the system. People's confidence in their institutions, people's confidence in how their tax dollars are spent and invested is really important. And people need to know that criminals who try to take advantage of a system, particularly at a time where we're pulling together as a country, where we're looking out for each other, where we're supporting each other, is still important. So we're making sure that we do have the tools. Hopefully we will not have to use them very much at all, because the vast majority of people are of good faith and just trying to support their families and trying to do the right things to get us all through this. But we do need the tools to go after those who deliberately choose to take advantage of people and systems vulnerability in a time of crisis.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Parry, CBC. One of your MPs, Marwan Tabbara from Kitchener, is facing charges. He stepped back from your caucus. These charges date back to April. I'd like to know when you or your officials learned about them and what action you're going to be taking.
As we said, I and my office only learned about the serious charges against this MP on Friday. No one in my party or my organization knew anything about them until Friday. And when we found out about these serious charges, the correct steps were taken for Mr. Tabbara to remove himself from the Liberal Party of Canada caucus. That is the measure that we have in place, and that is what we're doing. Okay. We only
learned of those serious allegations on Friday. As a party, neither myself nor my office were aware of that, were aware of what had happened before that. Now, obviously, these are very serious allegations, and Mr. Tabara has removed himself from the Liberal Party as justice takes its course.
It's prepared to move ahead on body cameras. In your conversation with the commissioner, was it you saying to the commissioner, "This is something I want the RCMP to do"? Was it the commissioner saying to you, "This is something we should do"? Where did the idea come from?
It was a conversation in which it was raised as one of the things that people had been talking about, and the commissioner pointed out that there had been studies and there had been pilot projects. There were concerns around the technology. There were concerns around the logistics involved, particularly in some of our more remote areas. And there were, of course, concerns around the financial cost of this. But in that discussion, it became clear that those were sort of practical challenges that could be resolved, and that it was probably an idea that's time has come to for greater transparency. But of course, it is only one measure amongst many, many things that we need to do to address systemic challenges in this country to racialized and Indigenous Canadians. There are so many different things that we need to look at as a country to take concrete action on, and that is something that we're engaged with, not just our justice system, but with Canadians, with organizations, with different advocacy groups, to look at how we can take this moment to bring real action forward to transform this country for the better.
Who raised it, sir? Was it you or the commissioner?
I don't recall. It was a conversation in which it came together, it came up.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.